Early human formation, which is how a child learns to speak, think, trust, obey, question, is now treated like public infrastructure. Who really shapes a child in the first 5 years of life? Is it the family or is it the state? Because if you follow the money, the policies, and the pressure points, the answer is increasingly not the parents. It's bureaucracies, forms, curriculums, checklists, targets. Early human formation, which is how a child learns to speak and think and trust, obey and question, is now treated like public infrastructure. So there's roads, water, electricity, and children. The logic goes like this: children are national resources, therefore, the state must manage them early, uniformly, and at scale. Sounds efficient. Sounds moral, right? Sounds like something that always ends well. All right, jokes aside, this shift didn't happen overnight. It crept in quietly under words like support and access and standards and outcomes. No one said we're replacing parents. They said we're helping families. But help has a funny way of turning into control once funding and regulation and compliance enter the home. When the state pays, the state decides what values are taught, what behaviors are rewarded, what ideas are age appropriate, what beliefs are harmful. By the time a child enters formal schooling, a massive amount of psychological wiring is already done. Things like language patterns, authority response, risk tolerance, identity formation. That stuff is not neutral territory. That is the foundation of a human being. So when governments fight over early childhood education and nutrition programs and developmental screenings and mandatory frameworks, they're not just arguing about babysitting your child, they're arguing about who gets first access to the human mind. And spoiler alert, whoever gets there first usually wins. The truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth is that the state doesn't trust parents. Not fully, not consistently, especially not poor parents, or religious parents, or rural parents, or parents who don't speak the right ideological language. So it builds systems for the child which conveniently bypasses the family. Centralized early childhood programs aren't just about safety or literacy, they're about predictability. A child shaped in a standardized environment is easier to measure, easier to classify, easier to integrate into future systems like school and labor markets and civic behavior, stuff like that. This is where people get defensive and say, but what about neglect? What about abuse? Yes, those exist. And yes, intervention matters, but watch how quickly exception becomes the default. The moment protection becomes policy, policy becomes expansion. Soon, opting out is framed as suspicious. Homeschooling gets regulated harder than AI systems. Have you ever thought of that? Parents are asked to prove competence while institutions assume it. Think about how backwards that is. The people, biologically, emotionally, and morally invested in a child, must justify themselves to structures that see children statistically. The state doesn't love your child, it manages them, it optimizes for averages. Families optimize for individuals. That difference matters. When early human formation is monopolized, diversity of thought shrinks before it even begins. Children learn what to think before they learn how to think. And once you standardize childhood, you don't need overt authoritarianism later. You already trained compliance. You've already shaped the reflexes. You've already set the boundaries of what is normal. This is a system's outcome. No villain is needed for this, just incentives. But why is early human formation such a battleground right now? Because every state knows the same thing. You don't control a society by convincing adults. Adults are expensive, they are stubborn, and they're already formed. You control the future by shaping children before they have language for resistance. That's why education ministries grow while family autonomy shrinks. That's why early childhood policy is framed as non negotiable. If you can define childhood, you can define adulthood 20 years later. And here is the part that nobody says out loud: families are inefficient, they are messy, they are unequal, they are unpredictable. The state hates unpredictability. So it offers uniformity in exchange for autonomy. Free programs, free meals, free services, but nothing is free. The price is influence. Once the state becomes the primary provider in the most formative years, parents become secondary contributors or advisors, assistants, at best, partners, at worst, obstacles. And when families push back, they're told that they're selfish or anti science or against children. It's a clever rhetorical trap. Who wants to sound anti child, right? The real question is not whether children need support. They do, obviously, they are children. The question is who decides what kind of human beings we are building? Independent thinkers or compliant processors, citizens or units, moral agents or managed outcomes. Early human formation is not about crayons and nap time. It is about sovereignty, not national sovereignty, but personal sovereignty. Who owns the first 5 years of life? Whoever answers that owns a lot more than people realize. When the state dominates early formation, responsibility gets outsourced. Parents slowly internalize the idea that experts know better. Confidence erodes and authority shifts. The family stops being the primary moral unit and becomes a delivery mechanism for institutional values. Children pick up on that fast. They learn where real power sits, not at home, but in systems. And systems do not love you back. They reward compliance, not character. They correct behavior, not conscience. Over time, this produces adults who are highly credentialed, highly anxious, and deeply dependent on external validation. That is not accidental, it is predictable. When human formation is centralized, culture becomes fragile. Everyone learns the same narratives, they fear the same penalties, and avoid the same questions. Innovation slows down, dissent feels dangerous, and when crises hit, be it economic, political, or moral, people look upward, not inward or outward to community. They wait for permission. That is the real cost, not bad education or low scores, dependency. A society raised to be managed will always ask to be managed harder when things get uncomfortable. This is why states fight so hard to control early childhood spaces. Once that ground is lost, it is nearly impossible to reclaim later. None of this means children shouldn't be protected or supported. That is a lazy rebuttal. The real alternative is pluralism: families with real authority, communities with real responsibility, multiple pathways for human formation, not one single pipeline. That's harder, it's riskier, it's less efficient, but it produces resilient humans, not standardized outputs. The irony is that states claim monopoly because they say that families can't be trusted equally. Yet, centralized systems fail children at scale all the time, and no one goes to jail. When a family fails, it is a tragedy. When a system fails, it's a policy review. That should bother you. Early human formation should be the most decentralized thing in society, not the most controlled, because once you hand the blueprint of humanity to institutions, you don't get to complain when they build something you don't recognize. So here's the bottom line: this isn't about left or right, it's about power and timing. Whoever shapes the earliest years shapes the rest by default. The state knows this. Corporations know this. NGOs know this. Parents are the only ones slowly being convinced to forget it. If you care about freedom and culture and innovation or even democracy, you cannot ignore early human formation. That is where everything starts. Not elections or laws, not protests, childhood. And if we keep pretending that the outsourcing that foundation has no cost, we're going to wake up one day surrounded by adults who were never taught how to think independently, only how to comply politely. So Congratulations, your child belongs to the state, unless you decide otherwise.